So what's going on, guys? My name is Seth Collins, and I'm coming to you from Cape Town, South Africa. And today is a super exciting day because I'm going to be sharing some information with you, which is extremely passionate to my heart. And it's something which, I've been doing for quite a lot of years. And this is the first time I'm actually put a documentation together where I actually want to share information with people. Obviously, doing the Millionaire Mentoring, it's changed my mindset quite a lot and showed me how to actually start. You know, I've done this for years and I've learned a lot of information, but I haven't actually been sharing it and teaching it. So obviously what Darren was sharing with us is, the learn, implement, share. And now like it's fitted into the equation and it's all just tying all the knots together, which is awesome. So today's training is all about mindset mastery. And I'm going to be going into details about how to reframe belief and what belief really is, the equation for belief. Because so many people, they hear these statements that you change your belief, you change the world. But how do you actually change a belief? How do you actually shift a belief? So I'm going to be going into a little bit of the formula of belief and the mechanics by which belief is actually created. Because I believe, you can't dance the steps unless you know what the steps are. So if you don't know what the formula is, you're not in a position where you can actually shift and alter and change belief patterns, from where you currently are to where you want to be. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of insights, deeper insights, and proven strategies. So I just want to say the stuff I'm going to be sharing with you, it's not like I just read a whole bunch of books and then I'm going to actually just be regurgitating the information. This is stuff I've actually applied over the last 10 years with clients. And, once you do something over and over and over and over again, you get enough data together, predictable data. And I'm sharing the predictable aspects with you, the stuff I've explored, tested, and tried over and over and over, and the stuff I know actually gets results. Because, over the years, I've worked with clients with all kinds of things, whether it's bipolar or stress or anxiety or, relationship pain, you name it, and what I'm going to be sharing with you is it doesn't matter what's actually going on in your life because it's the same formula that sorts everything out. And I found an awesome little silver lining that connects people. Everyone is actually experiencing the same challenges, everyone. None of my clients had anything extraordinarily different from the other one. It all comes down to self-value, worthiness, fear of rejection, guilt, the same usual stuff. We're all experiencing the same challenges as everyone else. So we're all in the same boat. No one's got something that's more ingrained or harder to change than another person. It's all just knowing the process, and then it's easy to do. So I'm going to jump into that a bit with you now. Okay, wait, this is not sharing. Hold on a second. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Cool. So what is this training all about? It's how to set your mind right for success. How to set your mind right to attract all the things you want in your reality. How to set your mind right to feel all the feelings you want to feel every day. Because your mindset is in direct correlation to your feel set. And your feel set are the feelings you feel every day, the feelings you feel in your physiology. Whether you're feeling happy every day, excited, or you're feeling sad or fearful, or whatever feelings they are basically a representation of what's happening inside your mind. So we can tell a lot by your feel set based on your mindset. And in my belief, our feel set is almost more important than our mindset. And this is definitely going to go contradictory to what a lot of societies teaches and a lot of stuff you might have learned before. But that's why I'm saying this is going to be a little bit advanced information. But you know what I'm saying, advanced, but it's actually stuff everyone already knows. They just haven't been explained to it in the right context and in a simplified format where it's digestible and easy to understand. So, over the years of doing this, I've pretty much put it and translated it into a format that is very easy for every person to understand. And that's been my goal with the information, is to be able to translate it, a complex idea, in such a simplistic form so that anyone can absorb the information and actually get the benefits. So this training is going to be about two things. First thing is neurological diplomacy and self-reflexive awareness. Now, neurological diplomacy is just making sure that everything that's going on in your mindset is ordered and structured in the right way that can allow you to access the best version of yourself. Because if there's no inner diplomacy, inner diplomacy is almost when you've got an agreement with yourself, when you've got negotiations with yourself, when you work with yourself, when you know how you work and you know how to work with yourself. There's a certain diplomacy there. Whereas if you were feeling maybe fear or lack or sadness or any other sensations that's out of your control, there would be a lack of diplomacy. So I'm going to be going through techniques on how to create diplomacy very rapidly within a mindset, within a feel set. And then the second thing is self-reflexive awareness. So self-reflexive awareness is when your awareness becomes aware of itself. So it's kind of like stepping outside of yourself and looking back at yourself and then zooming in and finding out, what are you made up of? Energetically, what are the beliefs you contain within yourself? Because if you're not self-reflexive, you don't know what challenges within you that you need to change. You don't know what aspects of you would like to refine, and there's a saying that says you cannot change what you do not own. So everything you are feeling in your life, in your body, in your mind, it's something you've chosen and you've induced yourself into that feeling, into that state. So without self-reflexive awareness, we can't become aware of what that state is, and we can't take ownership of it. So if you can't say, yes, I created this, it means you one step remove yourself from the ability to actually change that part of yourself. So how will this all happen? I'm going to be covering these 4 steps, and these 4 steps, I believe, will give you enough information to basically create an aha moment, or to create some kind of realization, or to open certain doorways within you, open certain windows. And that's what this is about, because it's all about awareness. When you become aware of something that you weren't previously aware about, that's when your consciousness expands, because it's become more. You become aware of more aspects of yourself. So the 4 points I'm going to be going through is the first point, which is how to make the unfamiliar familiar. And, like a lot of clients I see, they'll tell me, no, this is hard to do. And I tell them, no, it's not hard to do. You just haven't rehearsed the feeling of what it feels like when it's easy. So if it's hard to do, it means you keep playing over the scenario that it's hard to do, and that's why it feels hard to do, which is what's familiar. So for us to take on new character traits, new character personalities, it's important for us to start rehearsing the unfamiliar, the things we want to make familiar. And this is where self-reflexivity is so important, because then you can gauge between what you have in your life and what you don't have and what you'd like to have in your life. And that's when we create the unfamiliar into familiarity. The second thing is the truth about emotion and feeling. I'm going to be sharing with you guys something which hardly anyone actually knows. And there's a difference between feeling and emotion. And I'm going to be going into detail about what the difference is, because I honestly feel that if you don't actually know the difference and know exactly how emotions are created, it's pretty much impossible to change them. And then when we're feeling them, we feel powerless because we can't actually shift and change it by will. The third step is the art of being specifically vague. So we have 2 hemispheres of our brain, and they actually work differently. The one is assigned different tasks to the other one, and they must be working in unison for us to be basically operating as a whole being, as a unified being. So if we don't understand the language of the one hemisphere and the language of the other hemisphere, first of all, we are unable to connect in with our own full unified brain, and second of all, we can't change anything. We can't shift anything. And once you understand this, it can also improve your communication skills, because these are two very important aspects of language and communication: how we language the world externally, and how we have internal language, which is our beliefs, our thoughts, the processes we have, because that's part of our languaging system. And then the fourth step is the magic of belief, where I'm going to be sharing the formula of belief, how it's actually structured and broken down. Because so many people say, change your belief, you change your world, you change your life, but how do you change your belief? Give me the actual breakdown, the nitty gritty, the formula of it. So I'm going to be going into details about how that works as well. So what will this do for you? I believe when understanding these concepts, it creates the awareness of awareness, which is self-reflexivity. And when you have self-reflexivity, you have a very good relationship with yourself, what you're feeling in the moment you're feeling it, what's going on within your mind. You're aware of your weaknesses, you're aware of your strengths, you're aware of your challenges. And as soon as you're aware of all these things, it's so easy to change them, because then you know which aspects to focus on, and you know which aspects to make that are unfamiliar familiar. And I'm going to be teaching you how to create the unfamiliar to the familiar, and then make it actually a permanent part of your thinking process and your feel set. So it's about understanding the truth about emotion, which I feel not many people know. That's why I'm so excited to share this message. Understanding deeper processes of the self, connecting both hemispheres of the brain, that's with the vague and specific language, and then mastering the art of state management. And in my belief, the most powerful thing we can learn in this world is how to master our states. Because it doesn't matter what's going on in your life, it's just a state that you're feeling. Whether you're feeling an enlightened state, or you're feeling sad and down and fearful, or you're feeling excited or passionate, or you're feeling fascinated. It doesn't matter what state you're feeling. But when you know you have the ability to change any state into any state you choose, that gives you a certain amount of power. And that's what we call emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is just really having the awareness and having the control and knowing the process by which how you can shift state by choice. And it's very easy once we understand the formula of how it works. So he who controls his states controls the world. And a lot of the gurus in India, I went to India 2 years ago and I did some studies with a few gurus there. And this is what they've mastered. They've just mastered the art of state control. So I'm going to get into all these exciting things. So language is a reflection of consciousness, and consciousness is a reflection of language. So we can't expand ourselves further than what our language and physiology allows us to. So if you want to expand yourself as a being, your language needs to expand, your internal languaging system. So the way you video think, you internally think, and then how you externally communicate as well, because that's the language system that we think with. And usually I can gauge a lot about a person just by listening to the language and the words that they use and how they structure their language. That's giving so much deeper insight into how they're internally structured. So if we want to expand ourselves as a consciousness, if we want to grow, if we want to ascend, become more, our language needs to expand, our ability on how to communicate. And that's why it's so crucial, I believe, to understand the difference between the two hemispheres in the brain and the different languaging types. Because once we understand the different languaging types, it gives us a new level of awareness on how to communicate, how to listen, and how to actually use language in a more powerful way, because we can create profound effects in people with our language if we know how to use our language. And I think that's quite a gift to actually possess, and it's actually really easy. We just weren't taught how to do it. So firstly, I'm going to go into a little bit of details about me and talk about my story, how I got to this place. So about 13 years ago, I suffered really badly with anxiety, panic attacks. I used to go to a psychologist, and they classified me as agoraphobic, which is fear of people, fear of leaving the house. And if any of you know what it's like to experience anxiety or panic attacks, it's just a deep state of fear about everything. Fear about the world, fear about yourself. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even work. They let me off work. And this went on for like a whole year, actually, which I'm going to get into more details now. So fear of people, shy, nervous. I was an extremely shy child, extremely overly sensitive. I've invested over $30,000 into self-development into the last 13 years since my transformation occurred, and I'll share more info about that. For about 10 years now, I've lived a freedom lifestyle, living my own time, doing what I want, when I want to do it. So, and that's all just a result of actually all this mindset training, because you'll understand in the industry that the more you develop yourself, the more you increase your sense of belief, the more you can believe is possible. Because once we can believe more is possible, that possibility starts to happen in our life. Because it's like this 1-to-1 ratio of what's going on in the universe based on what we believe to be true. So if we can actually learn how to actually alter and shift belief, we can actually alter the universe. We can alter the reality we experience. Because in my studies and my experience, what I've come to realize is that the universe is just a 1-to-1 reflection on the vibration you're giving off, the frequency you're giving off, the beliefs you're emitting. So it's important to be able to zoom in and discover what those beliefs are. I started to change my mindset 10 years ago and never look back. Literally, it's just been like this, higher and higher and higher and higher. Because once that momentum starts, once the ball gets rolling, there's nothing that can stop it. Really, there's nothing. So I'm super passionate about health, about exercise. I'm passionate about the mind. I'm passionate about healthy living. I'm passionate about, balance, all the things that we can do in this life to obviously live the best life we can, to be in balance, to eat good food, to get in touch with our body, get in touch with our physiology, and most importantly, our emotional intelligence. So I really do love life, and every day for me is exciting, and I just choose to feel good feelings for no reason. And I think that's another powerful thing which I'm going to get into. So I'm no different from anyone else. Social anxiety. When I started out 13 or 10 years ago, I had no money, no job. I felt stuck, confused, lost. And I think this was a result for the anxiety, actually, is just not having any direction. Not knowing where I'm going, having no meaning, important meaning, no purpose. My why, I didn't even have a strong why. So I didn't have resourceful beliefs, no control over my emotions, no control over my mind. And I think this is a major part of the world actually suffer with these ideas, because we were never taught in school. We were never taught exactly how these things work. The instruction manual for me and for you. How does the mind work? How does the body work? How does the emotional realm work? We were never taught these valuable things. So then one day it all changed for me. And this became my greatest revelation. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever unlocked a portion of yourself which you didn't even realize was there. It's almost like one moment you're going along in a certain way, and then a transformation occurs. And all of a sudden you can start to see things which have always been there, but you just couldn't see them because you weren't in the right frame of mind. So my frame of mind shifted and changed, and I started to see parts of myself which I didn't even know existed. And this was part of the whole transformation. So when I was suffering with anxiety and the panic attacks, I was living with some people at the time, and it got really bad. And they knew someone at the skydiving club, because they used to skydive, who was actually a hypnotist, a German hypnotist. And they went to speak with him. His name was Christian Stadler. And he said, yeah, sure. He had worked with people with anxiety many times before. And he said, cool, well, I didn't have any money at the time. So he even offered to do a session with me for free, which literally was the greatest gift I think I've ever received in the universe. When you suffer with pain or anxiety or just something in your life and someone has the solution, like I would do anything for that. And I couldn't even afford it. And he literally just said to me, he just wants me to think good thoughts about him. That's all. So I went to his house, met with him, and spent 1 hour with him. And my whole life was changed forever after that, like completely shifted. So have you ever met someone that completely changed your life forever? And these people pop around in our life, and I see it as a common theme in a lot of people's lives, how someone just appears at the right timing, and I believe in synchronicity, and I believe our pain leads us to our passion. Our pain leads us to our purpose. Our pain leads us to our obsessions, the things which grow us the most in life. Because what happened to me turned out to be one of the greatest gifts I could have received. even though it was so painful. And when I met Christian, we just connected, and the synchronicity was actually completely mind-blowing. So he understood the power of the subconscious mind, and he'd had over 30 years of experience with hypnosis, with understanding the mind, and he did some pretty profound experiments in his time. I mean, he's the kind of guy who, he jumps out of, he's got, I think, over like 5,000 jumps out of an airplane with a wingsuit on. And he built these rockets that he can attach to his feet, and he literally would just fly, jump out of the airplane and shoot himself through the air. So he's someone who's obviously developed his belief capacity to a certain degree. And you'll find with a lot of people who are on the path of personal peak performance, and especially when it comes to hypnosis and NLP, if you ever meet a hypnotist, I got quite obsessed with the understanding of hypnosis, how it works. And then I started studying and understanding the world leaders. And you'll find that the most influential people in the world are the best hypnotists in the world. Because a hypnotist is, we're always hypnotizing each other anyways, but a hypnotist is someone who knows how to direct the trance, how to direct the thought, how to direct the hypnosis. And for instance, like Hitler, he was one of the world's top hypnotists. Barack Obama was raised since a child as a hypnotist, NLP master since young, and all these world leaders, they are gifted linguists, gifted with words, gifted with language. They know how to use their tone, pitch, anchoring. They know how to communicate. So what I realized is the guy I met, Christian, he was a world-class hypnotist, actually. And 1 hour with him, he literally, 1 hour after being with him, I didn't have anxiety anymore. It was gone. I didn't have panic. As the last time I had a panic attack was the day I saw him. And that was like over 10 years ago now. So it fascinated me quite a lot of what he did to me, because it was like magic. I couldn't actually figure out what had actually happened. So these techniques, however simple, they cause profound changes in their clients' models of the world. So hypnosis is all about finding out what is your model of the world and expanding the model of the world. We call it map making. Find out what is your current map of the world. How can you expand beyond your current map of the world? So the craziest irony that happened and the craziest synchronicity that happened is when I got to Christian, he told me that he was pretty much blown away because he was reading a book called Seth Speaks at the time that I arrived in his life. Now, I don't know if you guys believe in synchronicity or what, but this was pretty mind-blowing because I arrived at his doorstep. My name's Seth. He's reading a book called Seth Speaks. And what he told me to do was he told me to get the book and to read the book every night at 4 a.m. with a cup of peppermint tea. This was his one instruction to me, because I didn't know if you know this, but at 4 a.m., our pineal gland is when it's the most active in our body. And our pineal gland is a neurotransmitter that produces 3 neurochemicals, which is melatonin, serotonin, and dimethyltryptamine, DMT. And there's a very fascinating book called The Spirit Molecule, which is all about DMT. And that could be a whole nother webinar, actually. So he told me to read it at that time because 4 a.m. is when you are most aware during the day and most susceptible to believing in new beliefs, because our consciousness is at the theta waves. Now, theta waves, we've got different wave cycles in the brain. We've got beta, which is very active. You're thinking a lot, you're a little stressed. Then you've got alpha, which means you go into a little bit of a deeper state of meditation, which is what yoga does and certain meditations. And then you've got theta. Now, theta is what they call the psychic level. It's when you just wake up in the morning and you're half awake and half asleep. It's the most receptive you are, or your unconscious is, to absorbing information when you're at the theta level. Now, a lot of hypnotists, we train how to maintain that frequency, because obviously we work with receptivity and we work with suggestibility. So I read this whole book at 4 a.m., which means I was in the most suggestible state, which means I could absorb all the teachings. And he proclaimed this book to want to be one of the best books he'd ever read in his life, which created the greatest degree of transformation. And I read the whole book at 4 a.m. And pretty much from then onwards, it was just, my life was never the same. I literally just skyrocketed into wanting to learn more modalities. It really just put me on a quest. It empowered me to the point where I was realized that, what, in this world, no one's gonna save me, no one's gonna give me what I need. I need to go and do everything myself. And it put me in the right mindset to believe that I can get all the right knowledge I need to empower myself. So it sent me on an unexplored voyage to discover more of myself. Through that book, it was quite an insane book, because it taught me so many things about the universe and about our planet and about energy and the body and things I wasn't open to before. And it really just allowed me to see things in a completely different light. So that was kind of the beginning of my journey, and it led me to discovering more treasures within myself, more value within myself, more greatness within myself. And, I got quite obsessed with self-development after that. And I devoted the last 10 years to learning quantum physics, and which is basically all just understanding energetically how the world is structured and how we create with molecules, at a molecular level, energetically. I learned clean language, which is the art of metaphor modeling. And our limbic brain, which is our right hemisphere, is basically structured metaphorically. So its language is symbol language, metaphor language, which I'm going to get into a little bit more detail just now. I learned numerology. Actually, I first started out with numerology after the book. I learned the numerology, and then it became my profession for a few years. I became a full-time numerologist. And I don't know if you know what numerology is, but it's a study of your birth dates, being you came into the world at that specific date, so there's no coincidence. And then we break down the vibration of your name, because your name holds a resonance. And if you take ownership as that name, you're saying that you represent that resonance, and then that has certain personality characteristics. And it's very advanced. You can actually break it down into quite a lot of basic traits that we exhibit. Then neurosemantics, which is basically neuro, which is body, and semantics is meaning, and the interconnectedness of meaning and how we feel it in our physiology. Then there's hypnosis, and hypnosis actually translates to the language of the unconscious mind, or the language of the subconscious, or the language of the limbic brain. It's pretty much all the same. And then NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, how we can program our neurons, how we can program our inner thinking, how we can code. I like to use the analogy of a computer coder. We've got the front end system, we've got the back end system. And if we can understand the language of the back end system, we can actually get in there and recode. We can alter traits we don't like, certain feelings we don't like. And I'm going to be sharing with you the details of the front end and the back end and how they actually work with the different hemispheres of the brain. So why listen to me? One of the reasons is I'm a result of my own transformation. I came from pain and suffering, and I dedicated a lot of time and a lot of hours, and I transformed myself completely. Even the fact that I can even give a webinar now, it's something I think a lot of people wouldn't believe I would ever be doing, and even myself. So it's super nice to be in that place where I can do that. It's my magnificent obsession, and my highest passion has been learning the mind and the body, and I want to master it. It's my passion in this life. I want to learn as much as I can and practice and implement as much as I can, because I really believe if we understand the right formula, we can recode ourselves very easily, very simply. And I want to master it, and then I want to be able to translate it in a way other people can understand. So I've dedicated thousands of hours to learning, reading, and implementing over the last 10 years. I've personally facilitated transformation of many students. It's been my profession for over 10 years as a life coach. So I've seen hundreds of clients over the last 10 years, and I know what it takes to create a transformation within someone, and it's a very easy process. It's quite profound how we can just use words that can create transformation. So I'm in conviction of my abilities and what I can do with them. So my pain turned into my passion, which turned into my obsession, which I think is a really good sign. If we can take something painful and we can actually find the solution for it, and then we can teach that information to others. And I think that's the greatest gift we can share, is our own personal transformation and how we achieved it. Because there's so many people in the world who are possibly going through the same thing, and we can share it with them to help them get to the next level. So maybe they don't have to go through the pain and suffering that we went through. Okay, so I'm gonna first just stop for a second. So is this making sense, guys? Are you with me? Is it making sense? Okay, cool. Sweet, sweet, sweet. I just want to know that you're with me, you're with me. And at any points along this, please stop me, ask questions. I'm super, super excited for it to be very engaging. If there's something you don't understand or you want more clarity or see how we can give more understanding, please just unmute yourself and tell me to stop. Okay, so I'm going to start with the actual steps now. So step number 1, the difference from where you are now and where you want to be comes down to 2 things, which is familiar and unfamiliar. So everything you are right now is what's familiar to you. It's what you know, it's what you're used to, and we call it a comfort zone. And you will continue to get everything that's familiar to you, because if it's familiar to you, it means you've reiterated it within the unconscious mind, within your behavior, within your actions over and over and over again, because our unconscious mind or the subconscious or the limbic brain, it's basically a humble servant. And it only gives us what we rehearse. It only gives us what we reiterate. So it doesn't know that you're a good person, and it doesn't know what you like. It just gives you what you think about most frequently, what you speak about most frequently, and what behavior you exhibit most frequently. So whatever you are doing most frequently is the familiar vibration, and it will make sure you keep repeating that. They call it a self-reinforcing mechanism. It self-reinforces itself. So a belief self-reinforces itself to the degree that when you're going to change the belief, it almost feels like something's going to die. And that's why there's a bit of fear that pops up. But I'm going to go into more details of how we can actually bypass that mechanism. So how do we make the unfamiliar familiar? We first have to get into the preferred state, and then we have to rehearse it. So rehearsal is the key to making the unfamiliar familiar. Reiteration, rehearsal. So the first time I started studying quantum physics, it was quite a lot of information I didn't understand. But my teacher said to me, if you listen to it once and you still don't get it, listen to it again. Listen to it again and again and again and again until you don't think any other way. And for 5 years, I literally just listened to it probably like 5 or 6 hours a day, over and over and over and over, until I could recite it. And recite is a beautiful ambiguity, because to recite means I've got sight of it and I can see it again and again internally. So when you can reiterate and recite information, it means it's programmed into the unconscious mind. It means it's permanent part of your belief system structure. So that is a very powerful tool I used over the years, because whenever I wanted something to become part of my neurology, I knew I just had to go over and over and over it obsessively until I could recite it to people, until I could say it as if it was my information, because it was my first thought, it was my first belief, it was my first communication, was that idea. So this is when you make the familiar or shift from unfamiliar to familiar, it's like stepping off the diving board of familiarity. You're stepping off the diving board, and it's fearful and it's scary, and a lot of people don't want to do it because of the unknown. But the unknown is the unfamiliar, and the unknown is where you'll discover the rest of yourself. The only place you'll discover the rest of yourself. So making the unfamiliar familiar is the ability to go where you have not gone before, to do what you have not done before, to think in a way you have not thought before. So there's a process by actually we have to shift ourselves. We have to retrain ourselves. And the most powerful way to do it is reiteration. Honestly, like if there's something you want, just listen to it and repeat it over and over and over and over until it's just there permanently. Because the unconscious is just a humble servant and only gives you what you repeat, only gives you what you rehearse, what you reiterate. So to be who you have not been before, you've got to do what you have not done before. So step into the unknown, take a leap. The unknown is the only place where you will discover the rest of yourself, because that's where the rest of you is. That's where all the parts of you that you don't know about exist. And that makes sense, So if we want to discover portions of ourselves, and I believe that each person contains all aspects that are all possibilities that exist. So if there's a possibility within you that you want to actualize, that you want to make real in the world, it means if it's not here now, it means it's existing in the unknown, in the unfamiliar. So we got to step into the unknown. We got to step into the unfamiliar And we got to stay in that as long enough until it becomes familiar and becomes a permanent part of who we are. So I would suggest everyone to run to the unknown, because the unknown is the only place you'll discover the rest of you. So it should be defined as a very exciting place, where in our society, a lot of people define the unknown in a fearful way. You know, they're afraid of the unknown. And if you define the unknown in a fearful way, it means you'll never step into the unknown, which means you'll never discover other portions of yourself, which means you'll stay stuck. You'll stay cemented in the person that you are, and you can never become something else. So these are just bad beliefs that we've been fed to by our society over the years, the conditioning. And I think when we can start to define the unknown as an exciting place, you know, just the fact that I know the more I run to the unknown, the more I'm going to discover the parts of me I want to become aware of. It makes me excited to go into the unknown. And if I am excited to go into the unknown, I simply just move there easily. So it's all about how we reframe certain things in our life. And this is a really big one. So how to make the unfamiliar familiar. And I went over this a little bit already. It's through repetition, it's through rehearsal, it's through consistency. Because these all represent the same idea, actually. Repetition, rehearsal, consistency, reiteration, repeat. Whatever you do on repeat with consistency, it starts to train into your body consciousness, train into your mind consciousness. And the key to all of this is to mind to muscle it. You know, first we fill our mind with it over and over and over, then slowly we start exhibiting the physiology, you know, in the body language, and slowly we start walking as if we feel that way. So if you look at a sad person or a depressed person, chances are they crumple their body, they fold their body. If you look at someone who's in a bad state, they're sitting like this, their whole body's like, you know, the physiology is a direct result of the state of mind. If you look at someone who's liberated, they're standing open, you know, they're looking up, you know, and there's certain postures you can get into that when you're in those postures, you can't actually get into a bad state. So physiology is a very important key to keep in mind when we do these processes. Reiteration is probably the most important thing I've ever learned, to reiterate, go over and over and over until you can recite it out to people, until you can actually share it with people in an accurate way that they can download the message. Okay, so when the unfamiliar becomes familiar, it will become an autopilot response. It will become automatic. As soon as you've gone over it enough times that it's embedded within the unconscious mind will know exactly what to do with it and will give you the resources exactly when you need them. And this is such a powerful process, which a lot of people don't actually understand. You know, we've got the conscious mind and we've got the unconscious mind. Now, if we had to describe the difference between the two, the conscious mind could be a pin, and imagine the unconscious mind is the size of Australia. So now you're putting a pin in Australia. The unconscious mind is basically controlling all your beliefs in this moment, all the emotions you feel. It's controlling your heart rate, your hormone production. It's controlling all the things you're not aware of right now. And it's the same with beliefs. So all beliefs exist inside your unconscious mind. So we're not conscious of them. That's why if you had to go up to someone and say, what are your beliefs? Chances are they're not going to have a clue, because it's happening unconsciously, and it happens, the mechanism is designed that way so we can actually benefit, so that we can get along our day and we can just start doing things without having to think about everything. So the autopilot responses are based on what's happening within our unconscious. And if we want to change the automatic responses, we need to get in touch with reiteration, rehearsal, repetition over and over and over and over until we don't think any other way, until it's our first thought. And you'll find a lot of people who do self-development over like 5, 10, 15 years, you'll notice in their natural automatic responses, they're naturally confident. They naturally know what to say all the time. They naturally feel comfortable because they've done it so many times, it's an automatic response. So we can shortcut the process by just becoming aware of the process. You know, when I study and read information now, I know this. I know I'm just going to go over that maybe 20 times until I can repeat it and write it all out. And then what I usually do is I write it out and I verbalize it. So I do a lot of recording. I record my thoughts And I find if I verbalize it and if I write it down, it also gets imprinted in my unconscious much stronger, which means it leads to unconscious responses. So we program the subconscious through iteration. We get what we rehearse. So everything you are right now, it's what you've been rehearsing up until now. And it's so important to become aware of that, because then we know if we want to change something, we just need to start rehearsing different things into our mind consciousness and body consciousness. So how do we do that? We break the chain of continuity, because continuity is what makes you keep repeating what you are, even if it's things you don't prefer. You know, like after seeing so many clients, it's the insidious nature of the human to keep repeating the thing they don't want to actually do, which is crazy. I don't know why, but it's just, that's how it works. So for us to shift that, we need to break the continuity, because the continuity, you know, in quantum physics, they've proven that we travel through frames, which are like frames that are, you know, like a reel of film. You've got all the individual frames and you can look at them individually, but when you play them, it plays this continuous moment. But we're actually a whole lot of frames that are being played so far. It creates the illusion of movement. The movement is actually just an illusion, because okay, here's a frame, here's another frame, here's another frame, and there's so many frames going that it creates the illusion of movement, but it's actually just a whole lot of static frames moving a little bit at a time. So if we're going through all these frames, if we want to create a change within ourselves, we just need to stop the continuity of what we're doing, of what we're thinking. It's quite a simple process. We just got to stop doing the same thing we're always doing. We got to start doing things differently. Maybe brush your teeth with your left hand. You know, eat in a different place. Start listening to something different. Change. It's important for us to change things up, because as soon as we start doing things differently, our unconscious starts picking up, oh my gosh, okay, something different's happening. And that can start to create a snowball effect in us actually changing the way we see the world, where our map of the world, the way we feel about the world. And this is a very profound statement I'm going to share with you guys now, and it's something that really shifted me quite big, is the illusion of linearity. The illusion of linearity. We're trained by our society to think linear, and linear thinking is what keeps people very stuck and trapped. And I'll share with you why. So if we believe, right, that the past creates who you are now, it means you are a result of the past. And if you believe you're a result of the past, you're saying to yourself, I am who I am because X, Y, and Z happened in my life. And if you think about it that way, you're not going to be able to change yourself. So I'm going to share with you a non-linear way of thinking about this concept. So the past does not create who you are now. It's who you are now that creates the past. So the past and the future aren't places. You can never exist in them. They are perspectives of the now. So you can only be in the now, creating the illusion of the past and creating the illusion of the future. But you do that from the present. So if you believe you are a result of the past, it means you can't change, because you're identifying with who you are now as a result of all the experience you've had up until this moment. But the most accurate way to think about it is that the past doesn't create who you are now. It's who you choose to be in this moment that creates the past. So every person you reinvent yourself to become, every person you choose to be in this moment, has a different past. And this concept may be a little bit difficult for a lot of people to grab hold of, because it's non-linear. And remember, I'm starting to communicate with you with the limbic system, the unconscious mind. It's a non-linear brain. The part of you that controls all your beliefs is non-linear. So in order for us to actually get a hold of it and communicate with it, we need to start to become comfortable with non-linear language. So the past does not create who you are now. It's who you are now that creates the past. So every person you choose to become now has a different past, because in quantum physics, it states that all moments coexist simultaneously. So every moment you can think of, every version of you can think of, coexists at the same time. Everything. So there's a version of you that wins. There's a version of you that fails. There's a version of you that's making $10,000 a month. There's a version making $500 a month. Every moment exists at the same time. And this is proven science at the moment, quantum physics, proven science. All moments coexist simultaneously. They're only separated in frequency, the frequency you're giving off. So when you want to change something, right, you can never change anything on the reality you're in now. Okay, this is going to be a big one, guys. Are you ready? You can never change anything in the reality you are now. You can't change anything here. What you'll do is you'll change yourself, you'll change your vibration, and then you'll shift to another version of reality that's always had the change, that you've always been changed. So, and this is a very different way of thinking. It's a very different way of thinking, but it will create a massive change if you can understand this. So all moments coexist simultaneously. If you want to change anything, you can never change anything on the reality you're in. You can just change yourself, and then you'll shift to a version of reality of yourself where you've always had the change. Always had the change. And this is the easiest way to reinvent yourself, to become something you haven't been before. You know, because if there's something you want to be, I know it already exists, because I know everything exists. It's only separating frequency. And I just have to connect with the version of myself that's always been that way. So just by doing this concept, I can actually shift to a version of myself that contains the qualities that I want to have. I can shift to the version of me that's always contained those qualities. So I'm not learning something new. I'm shifting into the version of myself that's always known that doesn't know any other way. And it's a little bit different way of seeing things, but it is super profound if you can actually get it. So this is the greatest way to actually reinvent yourself. So you don't know what you've never been before. Here's a little diagram I put together just explaining the difference between the limbic brain, which is the unconscious or the subconscious, and where all beliefs and perception are stored. So if all your beliefs are happening in the unconscious mind, it seems like it would be a good idea to understand how the unconscious mind works. Because if we're not in the unconscious mind, we don't have any ability to start reprogramming and changing our belief systems structure. We can't, because they happen out of our conscious awareness. So if a person is in the neocortex, and the neocortex is the conscious mind, if we're in the neocortex of the conscious mind, by definition, the conscious is not aware of the unconscious. They're two different mechanisms. They're designed to do two different things. And they both have different languaging structures. So the conscious can't become aware of the unconscious. We can only learn how to connect with our unconsciousness so we can become aware of the information there. The process is about how do we take information from the unconscious into the conscious so the conscious can become aware of it. And that's the process I'm going to be sharing with you. So understanding the biggest shift that can occur is understanding what vague language is and understanding what specific language is. These are two different languaging types, and they're both extremely important to know, and I'm going to be going into a lot of details of the two. So, because if we don't know the difference between specific and vague, I'll be honest with you, it's impossible to change your emotions. It's impossible to have emotional intelligence. It's impossible to rewrite your beliefs. It's impossible. Unless you're around someone who has had the change and you're just doing everything they say. But this is just a shortcut. And over the years of doing this, my focus now is how can I take all the information I've learned and download it all into a person in the shortest amount of time? And the key to doing that is through language. And I've learned actually how to do it. I've learned to take a lot of information and be able to impart it very quickly to someone. So what took me maybe 10 years to learn, I can teach someone in, I don't know, a few days or a few hours. And that's kind of my goal, is being able to translating information into a digestible form in a way which a person can absorb that information permanently. So the limbic brain is a humble servant that just gives you what you rehearse. Doesn't care if you're a good person, doesn't care if you do good things in the world, doesn't care about that. It's non-logical, it's non-linear. So we've got the neocortex, which is actually completely logical. And then we've got the limbic, which is nonsensical and non-logical. So this is where the insidious nature occurs, because once we start stepping into the unconscious language, the conscious mind says that's not going to work because it's operating from a logical standpoint, whereas the limbic brain is non-logical. So there needs to be this kind of unison between the two minds where it's saying you are designed to do this job and you are designed to do this job. But if our logical mind is trying to figure out how to communicate to the unconscious, it's going to say that's not going to work. That doesn't make sense. Because one is logical, one is non-logical. So it's just important to know the difference between the two. So we know that the neocortex and the logical mind, we know them so well by now. Everyone knows the logical mind very well, and I think we've grown up in a logically dominated culture where we're taught to logic everything to death. Our schooling systems, everything is designed to teach us how to become way too much in the mind, way too much in the mind. And that's why a lot of people actually suffer with burnout and stress and anxiety and all these emotional states, which they can't control, because you can't change an emotion from the neocortex. You can only change it from the limbic or the unconscious or the subconscious. So this is the most profound part, is what is the language of the unconscious mind? What is its language? Because if this is responsible for all my beliefs, all my feelings that I'm feeling, all my emotions, you know, your unconscious mind or your limbic brain, it is your emotional brain. It's producing all the emotions you feel. And whatever emotions you feel, you're going to correspond by taking the actions according to the emotions you feel. So emotion is it's like the fuel sensor. And whatever is happening in your physiology, in your state, you have thoughts according to that, you have actions according to that. So the most important thing to harness and learn how to cultivate and understand is your states. And without understanding the language of the unconscious mind, you can't change your states. Impossible. So all your dreams are one doorway away. Step into this incredible new world, which is metaphor. Metaphor is the language, the doorway into the unconscious mind. So metaphor is the mediator between the conscious and the unconscious. And if you look, I studied tribal people. I got into quite a part of my life where I just wanted to understand. I wanted to go back into the past and find out in the tribes, you know, like what did they use? What did they use to understand the mind? And you'll find that, especially the shamans in like Peru, I got very interested in understanding their learnings. They all speak in metaphoric language. If you look at any top hypnotist, they all speak in metaphoric language. Analogy and metaphor is the greatest way to create change within a person's unconscious mind, because metaphor bypasses the logic mind. It completely bypasses the logic mind, completely. So when we communicate in metaphors, there's no conscious resistance, because the conscious mind does not understand metaphor language, doesn't understand it. So when we understand how to communicate in metaphor, we have to put the conscious mind down when we connect to metaphor. So for instance, when I do sessions with my client, it takes me probably about 20 to 30 minutes to be able to shift my client from the conscious into the unconscious, because they're so stuck in the conscious mind. And all I do is I get them to discover their own personal metaphors. So I'll give you a great analogy here. A metaphor basically is when you look at your computer and it's got all the desktop icons on it. When you click on the icon on your desktop, what does it do? It opens the program. It starts running the program. So metaphor does the same within our unconscious mind. Metaphor is what structures our programming unconsciously. So if you go into a state of, let's just say, anxiety, like I was in anxiety for years, it's because I had a metaphor within my unconscious mind that kept running. The program kept activating, because that is obviously what I was trained, or what I bought into, what I believed at the time. And in order to shift that, all you got to do, I'll give you a simplified version, is find the metaphor that keeps activating the program, which is called anxiety. That was it. As soon as you find that metaphor and you change the metaphor, you change the programming pretty much instantaneously. It's actually very, very simple. You know, it took me years of studies to come back to this conclusion that it's actually just so simple. And it's our natural language. I'm going to get into more details of how it actually works. So step number 2, the truth about emotion. What is emotion? Now, I believe, and this is after speaking to a lot of people, no one understands what is emotion. Nobody. They don't understand what it really, really is and how it works, and how it's not what you think it is. So what is an emotion? Emotion is the difference between your map of the world and your experience of the world. The map of the world and the experience of the world, because some people have a certain map of the world, but then they have a different experience of the world, and that creates an emotional response. So an emotion is an evaluation of a body sensation. I'll say that again. An emotion is an evaluation of a body sensation. Okay, so this is the Holy Grail right here, right? This is what shows us the different levels of language and communication. And this is what will give you an understanding of where you are within your own level of languaging system. So vague and specific language are basically the difference between the limbic and the neocortex, because one operates vaguely, the other operates specifically. One is basically logical, the other is non-logical. So the more we can familiar ourselves with each hemisphere, and the more we'll understand the language of each hemisphere, you'll find that just naturally, because this is natural to us. You know, we're born with this information. If you speak to children, you know, the more I learn this kind of language, the more I can actually communicate with children. It's their natural language. So this is actually not about learning something new. This is actually just about unlearning. This is natural to us. This is how we started out with this understanding. And then over conditioning and our parents and society and our peers completely changed our natural processing. And that's why we've got to actually get back to our original source, because most people are operating not even from the original level of communication. And if you're not operating at the original level of communication, you can't change anything. And this might be a little bit of a political statement I'm going to say now, but I believe, you know, in the 1960s, they banned hypnosis. They took it out of our schooling system, a lot of the descriptive language and the things I'm going to share with you now. Because if you don't teach children what I'm going to teach with you now, they will not know how to change their unconscious mind, which means it's easier to create slaves. And it's something I noticed with all the hypnotists when I started studying them, is these people are advanced people. These people are experiencing extraordinary lifestyle. And my deduction was, it's just because they understood the tools to recode the belief system, to believe more things are possible. They can achieve more things in their life, and they go ahead and do it. But if you don't understand the foundation, the formula by which that actually happens, it's pretty much impossible to create those shifts within you. So without knowing the difference, your language can never become eloquent in communication, and you will be unable to navigate within yourself. It'll be impossible if you don't know the difference between the two, because this is how we're structured. And if we don't know the steps, we can't dance the dance. Impossible. Okay, so our first level of language, which is the one right on the left, our first level of language is our VACOG, which is our five senses. It's our five senses perceiving the electron dance of the universe. And our five senses are video, auditory, kinesthetic, which is body sensation, body feeling, olfactory and gustatory, which is smell and taste. So our first level of language is our five senses and how they're perceiving the world. So what you're smelling, what sounds you're hearing, what are you looking at, what colors are you looking at, you know, what are you hearing, what are you feeling, what are you smelling, what are you tasting, and what are you seeing? The awareness of the five senses. And they call this sensory-based perception. It's words before words, the words before words. So this is the first level that we go through. And that's why if you look at children, young children, what do? They put everything in their mouth. They want to taste everything. It's their only way at that age, because they can't create evaluative meaning, to understand and make sense of the world by using the senses. So a lot of this is about losing your mind, coming back to your senses, the five senses. So the second level of language is sensory-based words. Now, this is when we give words to the senses. So the first level is just our perception of them. Our second is giving language to our perception. So now we're going into words about senses, which is descriptive language, sensory-based descriptive language. This is when we go into more detail about the five senses. So I hear a sound. Was it a loud sound? Was it a soft sound? How far away was the sound? What was the pitch? What was the tone? What was the modulation? So we're going into specific details now about the five senses. You know, like, what are you seeing? Is it bright? Is it dim? Is it colorful? Is it desaturated? Is it moving? Is it keeping still? When we feel something, where are you feeling in the body? What are you feeling in the body? Smelling, what does it smell like? What does it taste like? We're getting more descriptive within the five senses, which is the art of specific language. So these first two, the first level and the second level, are specific language. They're designed for specific language, and that's our primary level of communication, is specific language. It's our first level. It's when we are specific and we describe the five senses. Now, a lot of the gurus in India, you know, they refer to this idea of presence, how to become more present in the world. And the key to presence is the key to ability to describe the five senses when they're happening. Because when I'm present in my five senses, I have to be present in reality to be in my five senses, because I'm aware of what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm smelling, what I'm tasting. In this moment, I'm aware of those things, which means it brings me into the moment, brings me into presence. So presence is the art of the awareness of the five senses. And the more of them you can become aware of at the same time, the more present you'll become. So if you focus on what you're hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, and tasting all at the same time, all at once, you will find that you'll come into your body straight away. You'll come into your physiology, because these first hemispheres, the first and second, are basically the limbic brain, the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is structured in the physiology and the five senses. So the language of our limbic brain, which is the unconscious, is coded through the five senses. And they call this video coding, video thinking, you know, and we have internal sounds that we play. We have internal pictures that we play, which sends kinesthetic feeling responses into the body. And the kinesthetic feeling responses that come into the body determines the state that we go into. So our states that we go into are actually created through how we are processing these five senses internally. And I'll get into a little bit more details and put that together for you. So then we make the jump. Now this is where things get crazy in our reality. As soon as we jump from the second level to the third level, as soon as we jump to the third level, we step into vague language, which is called evaluative language or conceptual language. Now, the first two levels, 1 and 2, which is primary language and specific language, that is the language of precision and clarity. So if you want to speak in a way where people are understanding exactly what you're saying in a precise and clear manner, you speak descriptive, specific language. Because once you speak specific and descriptive, people will build an exact image in their mind of exactly what you're saying. They will know exactly what's going on, exactly, to the T. But as soon as we jump into the third level, we step into vague language, which is conceptual language, which is evaluative language. It's the language that brings new worlds into existence. You know, we can create fairy tales, and we can create so many vague concepts of the world. And the difference between the two is vague language, we're thinking in big chunks of information, where specific language, just little chunks of information. So as soon as we make that jump from the second level to the third level, that's where emotion exists. That's where judgment exists. That's where good and bad exists, polarity. That's where love, joy, fear, all emotion only exists at the third level. It doesn't exist at the first and the second level. Emotion only starts to exist at the third level, because this is where we create evaluative meaning. This is where we give meaning to the world. We give a definition to the world. This is where we start to map the world based on our past experiences. And this is where good and bad exists. This is where implication exists, expectation exists, judgment exists. It doesn't exist in the first two levels. So I just want to make that distinction, because as I'm building up, it's going to start to make quite a lot of sense. So only at the third level do we start creating meaning in the world, where we start calling something good or bad. But good and bad doesn't actually exist in the first and second level. There's no such thing as good and bad there, because good and bad can't exist within description. It can only exist within evaluation, because it's an evaluated concept. Good and bad by whose terms? You know, how can something be good and bad? So once we understand that they call this a meta state level. A meta state is when we are So on the second level, you have a hear, see, feel. Something's happening in your reality. You're seeing something, you're feeling something, you're hearing something, smelling something, tasting something. Then when you jump into the third level, you give meaning to the perception of the five senses. You create a meaning based on what you're perceiving. And as soon as you create a meaning, as soon as you step into the third level, you start distorting information, generalizing information, and deleting information. So the vaguer the information becomes, it's like musical chairs. The more it loses its validity, the more it becomes deleted, distorted, and generalized. So we start altering the information as soon as we start evaluating it, as soon as we go vague with it. And this is the insidious nature of the reason people are feeling certain emotional states. Because if we stay in the first two levels, love doesn't exist there, fear doesn't exist there, no emotions exist in the first two levels, because how do you describe a feeling? So when it comes to an emotion, this is what happens. We have an internal theater of the mind, which plays images and audio. And whatever images and audio are happening within your mind when you video think, it sends a kinesthetic wave of feeling into the body, a kinesthetic wave. And then we evaluate that kinesthetic wave, and that gives birth to an emotion. So an emotion is an evaluation of a kinesthetic sensation in the body. But it's not true. It's not true. As soon as we call it an emotion, we change it. We make it something it's not. So for instance, I thought I had anxiety, but I didn't even have anxiety. I just had a feeling in my body that was unresourceful. And this is the difference when we start describing and evaluating. So when I see a client, typically, the first thing I want to do is I want to move them from the third and fourth level. I want to move them back into the second and the first level. So if they say to me, I've got anxiety, I say to them, how do you know? How do you know that what you're feeling is anxiety? And they tell me, it's a feeling in my body. And then I say, can you describe that feeling to me? So now, when you describe, an emotion can't exist within description. So if I ask a person to describe anxiety, they can't tell me, it feels like anxiety, because that is an evaluation. If they describe to me the anxiety, they've got to actually start building it into a symbol, because they're using sensory-based symbol language. So they're going to tell me, is it a color? Is it moving? Is it keeping still? Does it have a shape? Does it have a size? Where is it located? These are all specific sensory-based words. And the interesting thing is that when we find a certain emotional state in the body, so I ask my clients, how do you know you feel anxiety? They say they don't know. Then I say, well, then how do you know what you're feeling is anxiety? And they say, it's just a feeling in the body. As soon as they tell me it's a feeling in the body, I've already shifted them to level 2, because I'm moving them back into the body, where it actually originates in the body. Next question I ask is, where is that located in your body? And they'll tell me either the solar plexus or in the heart. You know, there'll be a certain feeling in the body which feels like anxiety, but it's actually just a kinesthetic, a wave of sensation. Now, most people mistake emotions for kinesthetics. So there's no such thing as fear or pain or suffering or any of those things. Not from the second level, only from the third level, the evaluative level. And now this is where things even get crazier. They go to the fourth level, where they start evaluating their evaluations. When you evaluate an evaluation, you start going even a higher chunk of information, which means you're distorting, deleting, and generalizing even more information, which they refer to this as going up the semantic chain. This is where paranoia exists, and depression, anxiety. This is where it actually exists, is because the person's gone too many logical levels higher. They have a feeling, for instance, and then have a thought about that feeling, and then have a feeling about that thought. So a meta state is when you have a thought and you have a thought about that thought, then you have a thought about that thought. And now we start altering meaning through evaluating it more times. And then eventually a person's got this belief that, I will never amount to anything, I'm no good in the world, like I can't make money. Those are all highly evaluative words, which are very limiting to a belief structure. So the fourth level is even more abstract language. It's when we evaluate our evaluations, and that's when we head for the ozone. They call it ozone thinking. So an emotion is not what it seems. When you glue a label onto a feeling, you get an emotion. When you glue a label onto a feeling, a kinesthetic feeling, you give birth to an emotion. So we've got the primary level over here, which is your kinesthetic feeling. Let's just call this the wave of sensation you feel in your body, the kinesthetic. Then we evaluate it and we call it fear. But is it really fear? Only from an evaluative level it's fear. But if you describe the fear, the word can't exist anymore because fear is an evaluative word, not a descriptive word. So the key to accessing emotion is in your ability to describe. And this is something a lot of people do not know. People have lost track of descriptive language. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And if you lose track of descriptive language, it means you lose the ability to communicate with the unconscious mind. And you know, they didn't teach us this in schooling systems. They didn't teach us how to describe properly. And descriptive language is something that will make you a powerful communicator within your languaging system, as well as in getting in touch with your 5 senses. So the first sense receptor receives inputs or information from the dance of electrons in the universe. And from here, the neurology of the body transforms the information into nerve impulses and chemical messages that moves along the neural pathways. So it all starts as sense receptors in the body, and then it moves into the mind, which is basically showing that everything happens in the body first, and then it moves into the mind. So a lot of people, if they're in a bad state and they're having negative thoughts, they're trying to change the negative thoughts from the mind level. But that's not where it originated from, and you can't change it from that level. You only can change it from the body level, because that's where it originated from. So thoughts are secondary to feeling. Thoughts are secondary to state. So whatever state you're in, you magnetically have thoughts aligned to that state. If you have thoughts that you don't prefer, you can't change it from the thought level. It means you need to change the state. Because as soon as you change the state, the thoughts immediately will automatically change, because we only have resources equivalent to the state that you're in. So we get supported by our unconscious based on our state. So if I'm in a sad state, my unconscious has to give me all the resources to make me feel sad. It has to incorporate everything that comes along with sadness, because my unconscious is supporting your state. We open and activate neurology through state. We activate potential through state. So if you're in the right state, you have all the resources you need without even thinking about it, because that's the autopilot response that I was talking about in the beginning. It becomes an automatic response. So life responding to its environment, relating and communicating of messages. So language describes how we code information in various symbol formats. You know, we have various modes of awareness that enable us to communicate to ourselves and others, relating using pictures, sounds, sensations, which is movements and touch, smell and taste. And we call these the sensory representational systems, which in my belief are some of the most important parts of communication, and what I believe is lacking within everyone that I speak to is the inability to describe and utilize sensory-based language. So above and beyond the sensory level of representations, we have sensory-based words. These terms code or represent as a symbol of a symbol the information that we want to pass on about our sights, sounds, sensations, smells, and tastes. We refer to these as the VACOG. VAC, which is video, audio, and kinesthetic, and then OG, which is olfactory and gustatory, which is smell and taste. So my focus is always my VACOG. I only use those 3 because those are what's most prominent in most people: video, audio, and kinesthetic. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? So visual is pictures, sights, images. Auditory is sound, noise, music, tones. Kinesthetic is sensations, physical feelings of the body. Olfactory, smells, and then gustatory are tastes, which add a little bit of texture. In the way we use words to evoke our basic language of the mind, sights, sounds, and sensations. Now, we don't have neurons, neural pathways, neurotransmitters, or chemicals. It's all up there. It's all chemistry. It's all chemistry. Yet we experience the phenomenon of sights, sounds, and sensation. This experience illustrates how video, audio, and kinesthetic representations operate as a language code of consciousness. We language ourselves with sights, sounds, and sensations. That's how we code our world, is based on that, because that's our first level of communication. So let us now move up another level. So we've got the sensory-based descriptive level. Then we move up another level beyond the first languaging system of sense receptors, transfusing external stimuli into our bodies, creating before language awareness. And this is number one, which is the neurological languaging, and then moves to number two, which is the sensory-based languaging. Then next we have non-sensory based language. This refers to language that becomes even more abstract. This is where we move to the third level in that diagram. As we delete more of the specific sensory-based information and generalize to higher levels. So as we start distorting, generalizing, and deleting information, we're losing information because we're becoming more vague. And as we become more vague, we lose track of what's really going on. And that's where confusion can actually arise. It's the lack of specifics. So we shift from neurological languaging to sensory-based, and then we go to evaluative, and then we go to evaluation of evaluations. Now, all negative emotional states exist within evaluation. Did you know that if you stay within description, you can never have a semantic response to the world if you stay in description? All semantic responses only occur within evaluation. All emotions only occur within evaluations. They don't occur within description. So if we want to shift out of a negative state, we just got to shift back in to sensory-based descriptive language, and we change it just like that. And I'm going to give you more info on how to do that as we build. So as soon as you evaluate a feeling, as soon as you're evaluating a kinesthetic, you're deleting, generalizing, and distorting information. You're altering what's the communication as soon as you evaluate it. So that's when we head to the ozone and we create abstract thoughts about it. So there's no such thing as love. There's no such thing as fear. There's no such thing as anger. There's no such thing as happiness. These are not things. And this is actually comes from a Buddhist belief system, which actually corresponds to hypnosis as well. Love, fear, anger, and happiness are not solid things. They're not solid things. They are processes and activities we create to induce ourselves into specific states. So love is not a thing. It is a process and activity by which you undergo within yourself that activates the feeling of love within you. Same with fear, anger, and happiness. These are all processes that are occurring within you. They're not things. And we call this to de-thingify your world. To de-thingify your world is to stop defining it as a thing, because if you define it as a thing, you make it solid. If you see it as a process and activity, it gives you the ability to, if you understand the process, you can change the process, which means you change the activity, which means you change the neurological response, the emotional response that you feel in the body. And there's two roads into state. The first road is through memory, and the second road is through imagination. So we can alter our states by first remembering the last time you were feeling a certain way. So if I want to feel happy, if I think about the last time I was feeling happy, I'm inducing myself into a happy state. Or if I imagine what it would feel like to be in a happy state, I'm inducing myself into a happy state because I'm using the resources that already exist within my predictable structures of my mind. Are you guys still doing good? Are you still with me? You following along? I'm not boring you, huh? Okay, cool. So the greatest spell you can cast is the spell you can cast on yourself first. So every state that you're in any time of the day, is a state you've induced yourself into. So all states are self-induced. All states are self-induced. And this is such a great epiphany because you can throw the blame game out of the window because no one can induce you into another state. All states are self-induced, all of them. And if they're self-induced, it's a good sign because if you can induce yourself into sadness, it means you can induce yourself into happiness, excitement, whatever you choose. So the unconscious mind thinks in themes. it thinks in themes at a high logical level, which is the theme of love, or the theme of fascination, or the theme of discovery, or adventure, or freedom. These are all themes. And if we tap into those themes, we can draw descriptive information from the theme, and we can translate the theme through our descriptive language. And for instance, say I'm speaking to someone, and I want to induce that person into a state of fascination. All I've got to do is, I've got to remember the last time I was fascinated. Remember the two roads to state, memory and imagination. I remember the last time I felt fascinated. In the remembering of it, I'm going to start feeling the kinesthetic, because as soon as we start remembering, we start feeling in the body. I feel the kinesthetic. And all I got to do then is describe to the person how it feels when I feel fascinated. In the description, they get it, and they will shift into fascination. So this is how we can induce ourselves into states, and then we induce other people into the same state. But we have to go first. We have to be in the state first. So whatever emotional state you're in, whatever kinesthetic you're feeling, when you're communicating, you're basically going to be communicating from that standpoint. So for instance, if I'm going to do a live video, or I'm going to go speak in front of people, I'm going to get into a good state first, because I know that my resources are only equivalent to the state I'm in. And if I'm not in the right state, it means I'm not going to have the right resources to deliver the message that I need. So say, for instance, I'm going to be teaching people about fascination. I want to induce myself into a fascinated state first. So when I'm in that state and I'm communicating, the other people are going to immediately go into the same state, because I'm translating. The state you're in is like the energy you're embedding within the words that you use. And the people will feel that energy, and that they will shift into the same state. But we have to be in that state first. So all energy and flows of sensation are basically the key to state. And how do you know you feel X? That's the question I ask about emotion. How do you know what you're feeling is love? How do you know what you're feeling is sadness? How do you know what you're feeling is happiness? How do you know what you're feeling is sad? How do you know that? Guarantee if you ask yourself this question, you won't know the answer. And the answer will immediately come back to your first two levels, which are specific, descriptive. So this is the chunking up and the chunking down levels. So the higher we go in the logical levels, the more we evaluate. The lower we go down, the more they call it you got nominalize. Nominalize is when we go up the chain and evaluate, and denominalize is when we come down. We go from evaluation, vague language, to specifics, up and down the chain. So when we chunk down from evaluation, we go into description. So the art of chunking down from evaluation, going down into smaller chunks, is moving towards descriptive language. So we're moving from vague into description. So if you describe the world, you can never have a neurological response to it or a semantic response to it. Only when you evaluate it do you create emotion and do you create meaning. So description creates presence. And when you can denominalize, which is becoming more specific, it brings you more into your body. So for instance, someone says, I've got anxiety. I need to ask them a specific question, because I know anxiety is vague. I need to ask them a specific question to get more specific details. So that's why I asked them, how do you know? How specifically do you know what you're feeling is anxiety? How do you, and then whatever they tell me next, I say, how do you specifically know that? And whatever they tell me next, I say, how do you specifically know that? So I'm chunking them down by asking specific questions. So if I'm speaking to someone, I immediately can tell, is this person specific in their language or are they vague in their language? By the languaging they're using. If they're vague, I'm going to go specific in my language. If they're specific, I'm going to go vague in my language. So I'm going to counterbalance their language based on whether they're specific or they're vague, which you'll find is going to give a lot of power, actually, because vague people, I'll get into that, actually. It's the next slide. So we have an inner theater of the mind that plays audio, it plays visual, and that audio and visual sends kinesthetic flows of sensation to the body. When we describe in detail the kinesthetic feeling in the body, we build it into a symbol. And that is the premise of emotional control, is converting kinesthetics into symbols, converting a kinesthetic flow feeling in the body into a symbol, into a metaphor, because the metaphor is the program that activates your neurology, that keeps activating that process you're calling love, hate, fear, joy, whatever. So, number 3, the art of being specifically vague. So I made this cool little diagram, and basically it just shows the structure of a tree. Now, vague language is at the top, and I refer to vague language as the language of the heavens, evaluative language, conceptual language, because the higher you go in the abstraction scale, the more vague things become, and the more airy-fairy they become, more fluffy they become. They call these people the dreamers, or you've heard the saying, that person's airy-fairy. Generally, people who are very vague in their thinking, they refer to them as airy-fairy. And very vague people, you'll meet them, they come across as if they've almost stepped out of like a fantasy movie or something. They look like a cartoon character. They're very animated people. So it's the language of the heavens. This is where the wondering comes from. This is where implication comes from. And this can be quite dangerous. I'll give you an example, like in a relationship. To say your partner says to you, oh, I need space. And you're like, you need space? Like, what does that mean? Because it's so vague. What does it mean? So now I'm trying to figure out the meaning means. Does it mean she doesn't want to be with me anymore? Does it mean she literally just wants to take an hour a day to be on her own? What does it actually mean? And because it's so vague language, right? The unconscious is always trying to make sense of everything. If you speak vaguely to someone, vague language is the greatest form of hypnosis, because now I don't know what they mean when they say they want space. But my unconscious is going to try to figure it out. And if it can't find the definitive meaning, it's going to say all the meanings are correct because it's speaking in a very ambiguous manner. So ambiguity is the key to hypnosis, actually, because there's no definitive meaning. So the unconscious is searching for it, and there's multiple meanings for the same wording, which means it's going to say all of them are correct. And that creates a deep level of what they call pathological trance. Now, most people are doing this to each other. They're speaking, and now that I'm sharing this with you, you're probably going to notice it a lot more when you speak to people, because I'm highly attuned to it now. People are inducing people into states of trance through their vague communication. And it's very hard to resist, because if you speak through implication, or you speak through presupposition, we speak through ambiguity, we're trained to use that language to induce people into trance. It's actually really powerful. So we've got vague language on top. At the bottom, right at the bottom, we've got the specific language, which is like the nitty-gritty. It's like the roots and the rocks of the earth. That's where we have the 5 senses. It's where we've got certainty. It's where we've got detail. We've got description. It's where you're grounded. So if a person doesn't feel grounded, it just means they're not specific within their language. That's all it means. And if they lack clarity, it means they're not specific. Because the vaguer you become, the more you wonder, the less clarity you have. Because by definition, precision and clarity exists within specifics. Vague language is conceptual and evaluative. They're 2 different forms. But my belief and everything I've learned is that you don't want to be vague and you don't want to be specific. You want to be right in the center. And we call this the art of being specifically vague. The art of being specific with your vagueness. Now that changes the whole ballgame, because it means you can abstract. You can go to vague terms, but you conscious abstraction. If I'm consciously becoming vague and I'm consciously evaluating, it's a whole different ballgame than being unconsciously evaluating, because then I'm in more control over my perception and I'm more control over my emotions. So when you're specifically vague, it's when you connect the heaven to the earth and you allow yourself to utilize both types of languages within your communication. And within that space, you will find so much power within yourself. The art of being specifically vague, in my belief, is the art of emotional control. That's where your emotional control starts. So the language of specificity, I'm going to go into a bit more detail. The language of specificity, it's used to cast spells of precision and clarity, or when you want to deframe. Deframing is when you basically breaking something apart. So if someone says to you, life is hard, okay, they've just given me their belief, life is hard. And that's a vague belief. So all limitation occurs within people because they have vague beliefs and not specific beliefs. A big difference. So if someone says life's hard, that's a vague belief. So I'm going to come at them with a specific wording. What specifically about life makes it feel hard? What's specifically about life? So now they're going to have to give me more details and insight as to why they have that belief. And the detail, the insight they give me with that question is going to reveal the illogicalness of that belief. So all limiting beliefs are vague, all of them. All limiting beliefs are vague. But specifics reveal the illogicalness of vague beliefs. So in order for us to take a vague belief and break it apart into nothing, we have to become specific with it. We have to deframe the belief. Because I like to think of things as frames. You know, we reframe, which creates beliefs, and then we deframe, which pulls them apart. Then we can post-frame and pre-frame and out-frame. I'm going to get a bit more into the framing mechanism. And through this framing ability, this is where we can construct a belief and we can deconstruct it. Because all limiting beliefs are vague. And if you know that, then you know if I have to take the vague belief and go specific on it, I'm going to disassemble it. I'm going to defragment it. I'm going to break it apart. I'm going to actually break it into the pieces that I need to rebuild, to put in place a more unlimited belief. So when you provide a clear, precise, and specific symbol, it signals the brain to run that particular movie. And if we're not using specific, clear symbols, our brain does not know what movie to run. Think about it, if you've got a vague belief, vague beliefs are implications, they're presuppositions, they have multiple meanings. So how's your body going to how's your unconscious going to know what you want when you're thinking in ambiguities? It's actually so crazy. You know, it's enough to send a person on a whirlwind of confusion, of wondering, of pain, of suffering. That's where it starts. So description of what you hear and see and feel are the sensory-based terms, which are the language of specificity. And we can say almost anything to anyone if we use sensory-based descriptive language. Further, we can say almost nothing to anybody if we use evaluative, non-sensory-based language, because it's lacking information, it's lacking details. You cannot evoke a negative response in a person if you speak specifically to them. It's impossible. Or within yourself. If you're thinking in specific sensory-based details, you can't have a negative emotional response to the world. It's impossible. So we enrich our language and our communication skills when we use more specific visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and sensory-based language components. So to communicate with more clarity and more precision, go descriptive. I know I'm talking about a lot in this training, but I'm going over and over because the unconscious has to hear something 3 to 5 times before it starts to grab a hold of it and make it more permanent part of the structure. So repetition, remember I was talking about reiteration and repetition. The key is to repeat the same thing in different ways if you want people to start to grab hold of the change and make changes within themselves, because the unconscious mind, when it hears the same thing in multiple ways, it's starting to reiterate and repeat, and it's starting to make sense of it. So words will flow out your mouth as you describe what you experienced and represent. So the key to this, and this is the art of storytelling as well, this is how this information can actually make you a better talker, a better writer, is that if you can add more sensory-based descriptive words within your stories, you will be able to translate an experience to someone to make them feel as if they were there already. And this is where we describe an experience to someone. You know, I can have the most amazing experience of my life, but if I can't describe it to someone, they can't go there with me. I can't take them to that experience with me. So when we can describe better, we can describe experiences to people, which means it'll feel like they've already been there and they have the same experience without them having to go through it. And this is our ability to translate an experience and translate information to people so that they can have the information without having to go through the process. And this is what's helped me so much as a teacher, teaching this kind of information, how I can teach a lot of information in a very short amount of time because I'm using this formula. So without the ability to distinguish between descriptive and evaluative language, you will never become professional or elegant in your language use. So begin here at learning the power and simplicity of the see, hear, feel language, sensory-based language. It provides the magic of clarity, the magic of precision, and the magic that deframes. It deframes vague beliefs. It deframes vague language. It pulls apart old constructions. It pulls apart abstractions that confuse. And here's the language of evaluation. So the language of evaluation is used to cast spells of conceptualization, to construct new realities and to frame new ways of thinking in order to reframe and outframe the world. So there is a place for vague language, definitely, as long as we're consciously using it. So such represents our uniqueness and glory as human beings. We only need to do so with more mindfulness and more thoughtfulness, or develop consciousness of abstracting. So it's okay to abstract, it's okay to evaluate, but let's do it from a conscious standpoint. So we know what we're doing. Because if you're going to build a new frame around you, at least be aware of what that frame is, so that you don't create a frame of limitation, a frame that's going to box you into a position where you can't actually access your full potential. So I'm going to give you a great little story here, which is going to illustrate the point, the difference between the specific and vague. So imagine a father sees his teenage son sitting on the couch watching TV. And at this point, we only have sensory-based set of representations, right? Or have you already drawn a conclusion and evaluated it? So suppose a father sees and immediately jumps a logical level to classify that behavior as a member of the class of what we call laziness. So he thereby sets laziness as his frame. So the father walks in, sees his son watching TV, and immediately he evaluates. Lazy. He literally casts a spell on his child, putting him in the frame of laziness. He looks at the specific behavior and no longer sees them as merely sensory-based pieces of information anymore. He looks and sees laziness with a capital L. Do you know what? Laziness does not exist in the world. It does not exist in the world. It only exists in the evaluation of the description of the VACOG. So for instance, his son was lying there, relaxed, watching a program. I just described it to you. Lying there, relaxed, that's description. Now, if I evaluate it, he's lazy. Are you guys seeing you're seeing the shift here? Huh? Okay, cool. So what does exist involves simply the see, hear, and feel information. Lying on the couch, watching TV, the meaning that we as meaning makers give those video, audio, and kinesthetic signals depend upon our beliefs, our values, and our understandings, our abstractions, and our paradigms. So reframe. This is where reframing is so powerful. I'm so glad John is lying there, relaxing, and enjoying life. So he's not lazy. He's lying there, relaxing, and enjoying life. I've just reframed that meaning belief, because if the father classifies him as lazy and he casts that spell of laziness, he's going to create a frame around his child of lazy, which means whenever he sees him, he's going to see laziness, which means he's going to create his son to be more lazy, because he's going to put a spell on him by classifying him in a certain evaluative box. So meaning, semantics, exists only and exclusively in the mind. It exists and arises as a form of evaluation. So all meaning is evaluated. All meaning is evaluated. This makes meaning a higher logical level abstraction about information. So meaning operates as information about information at a higher level. It involves meta-level thoughts about lower level descriptive thoughts. So the first circle we've got here, you see we've got the VACOG, which is the 5 senses, the video, the audio, the kinesthetic. That's the flow of feeling. Then we evaluate that and we start creating meaning. And that's where emotion exists, and judgment. And then we evaluate that again, and we evaluate our evaluations. Now, the more evaluations we make, the more we distort the information, the more we go up the semantic scale, the more we'll feel, let's just say, semantic responses we don't want. Unless we're evaluating in the positive context, then it's fine. So our ability to reframe goes like this. we say it doesn't mean this, it means this. Doesn't mean X, but it means Y. So this is how we would reframe the situation. John isn't being lazy. He simply knows how to relax and enjoy himself. So we've just took one person, one belief, we've broken it apart, and we've reframed it for them by using that languaging system. It doesn't mean this, it means that. And we've taken an evaluative and we've broken it down into a descriptive. He just knows how to relax and enjoy himself, because that's all he's doing. If we describe it, he's lying there, he looks calm, he looks relaxed, enjoying himself. He's not being lazy. So as we reframe it, we transform the meaning. And I'll give you another example how this can work. So say, for instance, I'm going to use the relationship one. It's just because it's one I've noticed before. Say you're with your partner, and now something's happened. You're having a little arguments, blah, 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 blah. And she says to you, when you look at me like that, it makes me feel like you don't care. When you look at me like that, it makes me feel like you don't care. So this is a very high level abstraction. She's saying in her mind, when you have that look on your face, it means you don't care. How can a look on a face mean that you don't care? And she's put this together at rapid speeds, but that's not actually what it means, because it's all vague. It's a vague meaning she's put on the scenario. Well, I'll give you another example. Say, for instance, you're going to dinner with your partner and you arrive late. And she says to you, when you arrive late, it makes me feel like you don't care. When you arrive late, it makes me feel like you don't care. So she's classifying that lateness means non-caring. Okay, and that is just a very abstract, that is nonsensical and abstract. But if you want to deframe it, this is what you would say to her. You would say, okay, so if I arrive late, it means I don't care. So does it mean if I arrive early, it means I care more? Or how late do I have to arrive? So if I arrive 5 minutes, it means I don't care a little bit. But if I arrive 20 minutes, it means I don't care a lot. So we start shaking it apart by deframing it and saying, maybe me arriving late doesn't mean I don't care. It means that I just took extra time stopping at a shop to buy you these flowers that I've got to give you. So we're reframing the situation. We say, it doesn't mean I don't care. It means this. It means I just left work a little bit late, and that's why I arrived late. Simple as that. So quickly we evaluate and put boxes around. And you'll notice, now that I'm sharing this with you, you'll notice where you do this in all aspects of your life. We do it with everything, absolutely everything. But the key component I'm going to share on the next page, which is going to make everything I'm saying clear. So vague language is evaluative language. Vague language, by definition, lacks specific details, which means it's non-logical, nonsensical, it doesn't make sense, which means if you're holding a belief in place that's vague, that doesn't lack specifics, you're just carrying around this limiting belief without any reason, which is crazy, actually. It's non-logical. So all limiting beliefs are vague by nature, and specifics reveal illogicalness of vague beliefs. Specifics reveal illogicalness of vague beliefs. So it is so important for us to use specific language. Okay, and the fourth and final step is the magic of belief. So nothing means anything. No thing means anything. And this is the premise of hypnosis and neurolinguistics and all these high-level mindset technologies. Nothing means anything except the meaning you give it, except the meaning you assign to it. And whatever meaning you assign to it is the result and the effect you're going to get out of it. So if I believe that I'm never going to make money, life's hard, guess what? I'm never going to make money and life's going to be hard in the world, because that's the meaning that I'm assigning to the world. So what meanings are you giving to the world? It's so important to find out what meanings are contained within you. So you can find out, do you want to keep them? Are they vague? Are they specific? And how you can, if they are vague, how you can shatter them and break them apart by using specific questioning. So whatever meaning you give the world is the effect you get back from the world. So your belief, your emotion, your behavior creates a vibration, it creates an energy that emits out of you, and the universe responds with the experience equivalent to the energy that you're giving off, to the meaning that you're assigning to the world. Because We are meaning makers by nature. We can't not create meaning, but what meaning are we creating? And if we're creating meaning, did we consciously choose that meaning? And are we able to deconstruct a meaning that we weren't conscious of when we created it? So belief, emotion, behavior. To believe is the most likely thing you're capable of getting. So you've always gotten what you've chosen, consciously or unconsciously. Everything you get in your life is based on what you believe, everything, conscious or unconscious. So if you're getting things in your life that you don't prefer, you can use that as a gauging system to show you what your beliefs are the experiences you're having in life. And if they're not experiences you prefer, it means you've got a vague belief somewhere that prevents that from happening, because we're all born beliefless. We're born without belief. We're born without belief. That means all the belief you contain now, you didn't have when you were born. So somewhere along the line, you picked it up. So which means all the limiting beliefs you contain, and we all contain a lot of limiting beliefs. All the limiting beliefs we contain, we weren't born with them. We picked them up from our parents, from our society, from our peers, from the conditioning, from the newspapers, from the TV, from the movies. You know that movies are the greatest form of hypnosis because they're metaphors, they're stories. So movies alter our processes more deeper than anything else. So it's so important to be conscious of what movies you're picking. Because if we're watching certain kinds of movie, it's altering and shifting our belief systems. And we have no resistance because movies are metaphors which bypass the logical mind. And a lot of the movie companies condition our society through the movies. How crazy is this? So in my hypnosis training, we were given illustrations of multiple Disney movies that have been froze framed and depicted and stripped apart, and found so many places in them where they are teaching limitations to the children. So they basically, one of my teachers has basically done this research and figured out that a lot of our conditioning happens from the movies we watch as children, the Disney movies, the cartoons. It's crazy, actually. So we're all born beliefless. Nothing means anything aside from the associations that we give it, based on your beliefs, your values, and your understandings. So we think by association. Meaning is created through association. We develop beliefs to make sense of the world. And the thing without a belief is, this is quite an interesting thing about beliefs. Beliefs, right? Beliefs are filters that filter out everything else that's not in the belief. So if you don't believe it, it'll be standing right in front of you, and you know what? You won't see it because it filters out the five senses. You can only sense what you believe. If you don't believe it, remember your belief systems are filters. They filter out everything else that's not in the belief. So if you don't believe it, you physically won't see it. It'll be right there, but you won't be able to perceive it. Because you can only perceive what you contain. You can only perceive what you contain. So the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So your limitations are confined by the limits of your internal languaging system, which are all the vague beliefs, the vague limitations we hold in place. And we can transcend our limitations through transcending our vague beliefs and becoming more specific with them. So what is the formula for belief? What is the formula of how we create meaning? And this is the formula here. It's super simple, super profound. EB equals or leads to IS. EB stands for external behavior, what's happening in the external world. And internal state is what's happening internally in your state. So a belief is created when we glue an internal state into an external behavior, something that's happening on the outside world. So remember I used just now that analogy of arriving late, and she says, when you arrive late, it makes me feel like you don't care. So in every belief statement, we've got the EBIS. But if we want to get more clarity, we've got to pull the EB apart and we've got to pull the IS apart. Okay, so in the statement, when you arrive late, it makes me feel like you don't care. Okay, arriving late is the external behavior. You arrive late. So we pull it there, arriving late. Internal state is not feeling cared for, not feeling cared for. So when you arrive late, external behavior equals not feeling cared for. So in her mind, she said, when you arrive late, makes me feel like you don't care. That's gluing an external behavior to an internal state, creating associative meaning. But if we understand this is how it works, we can fragment it. We can pull the EB there, arriving late, and the IS there, which is not feeling loved, and we can ask specific questions to each one of them. So what specifically makes you feel like I don't love you when I arrive late? By her answering the question, it's going to deframe her completely. What specifically makes you feel like I don't care for you when I arrive late? So the key to all belief and to all meaning is to find the EB and the IS, because it's within every single belief, and to pull them apart and then to deframe them with specific questions on each one. So your external behavior equals or leads to your internal state. And this is with everything, with all feelings, all associations. So belief is created through association. And association is cause and effect. And it's when this happens, this must happen. When that happens, it means this. They call it, it's very insidious. They call it the cause and effects formula. So when you glue an event, which is an external behavior, happening in the outside world, to a feeling, which is internal state, that's happening inside you. Voila, you've created a belief. So a belief is only created when we glue those two things together. And usually, like for instance, say for instance you had a father and he abused the child, right? Suddenly the child's going to think dad doesn't love me, which means maybe I'm not worth much. So he develops that idea. I'm not worth loving. Dad doesn't, because he treats me badly, external behavior, it means I'm not worth much. He creates an associative meaning, which means he creates a frame around himself, devaluing himself based on what his father's doing. Okay, so that's one frame. Now later on in life, in school, the children treat him bad. And he says, you see, I was right. The children also think I'm of less value. So that creates another logical level higher. And he says, if the children see it as, well, I'm never going to change. So I'm just giving an example of how the mechanism actually works. So we've got an external behavior, which is over here, these beautiful flowers. And we've got the internal state that it creates. So sometimes you might be in nature. I know a lot of people do love flowers. I love flowers. And if I'm around a lot of flowers, it actually makes me feel really good. It puts me into a really good state. And that just means when I see flowers, I feel a good feeling on the internal state of my body. That's the association I've connected to flowers. When on another meaning, for instance, like, okay, fire, for instance, there's two ways to frame fire. So imagine we've got one situation where there was a fire in someone's house and their house was burned down. It was one of the most traumatic events of their life. Now, when you ask them about fire, they're immediately going to go into a very negative state because fire means pain. Fire, external behavior, means pain, internal state. That's the way they've deduced it. But another situation with a child who you've sent him on, he's gone on camping with his friends, and they sit behind at night with the campfire, telling stories, roasting marshmallows. So when you mention fire to him, he's got positive feelings around fire. But does fire mean anything then? What does fire mean? If to one person fire means pain, and to the other person fire means bliss, does fire even have a meaning? And that's what takes back to my first statement. Nothing means anything except the meaning that you give it. Fire on its own means nothing. It's meaningless. It's only the association we glue to fire that gives it the meaning. So every time you see a flower, you will feel a certain feeling of bliss, if that's the association. So whatever state you are feeling in the moment, you are connecting to what's happening outside you in the moment. So whatever you're feeling in the moment, depending on the external behavior, you will glue it to the external behavior and you will create a meaning. So when it, basically like your unconscious saying, when this happens, it means that must happen. Cause and effect, cause and effect. Then as you validate that, it becomes a belief. So you first take the external behavior and the internal state, you glue it together. Now, that's not the part where the belief is actually formed. That's not where it's formed. So become aware of this process lightning fast. This is how the belief is actually formed. It all comes down to the yes, the no, and the mind. So a thought that we say no to just becomes a thought. A thought that we validate and say yes to becomes a belief. So the no, the yes, and the mind operate at a meta state, which is a thought about a thought. So we first have a thought, and then we reflect upon that thought, whether we say yes or no to it. And however we reflect upon the thought confirms whether we're going to keep it around or not. So that's why I believe yes, no, and mind are the most powerful words we can actually use in our language, because they allow beliefs in and they take beliefs out. If you say no to a belief you don't want, it becomes a thought. If you say yes to a thought, it becomes a belief. So without the clarity of the yes and the no in the mind, we can't move things out and bring things in. It's impossible. And in our society, it seems like people say yes to things they mean no to, and they say no to things they mean yes to. So there's already so much confusion in that idea. So first we create evaluative thought. We've got external behavior, internal state. We glue the cause and effect. Then we create a meta level where we validate it, whether it's a yes or no. If we validate it as a yes, it becomes more of an ingrained belief, more permanent belief within us. So all beliefs that you currently have are beliefs you've validated, and you believe they serve you. That's why you say yes to them. But it could be vague. So that's why it's so important to go through the beliefs and find out if you want them or not, and use the yes, no in the mind. This is a great way to reprogram yourself, by the way. And I'm using it in addition to the proclamations we've recently been using. If you want to proclaim something and then say yes and mine afterwards, you actually glue it to you even stronger. You say mine, that's mine, my $10,000, my success, my realization of my value. It's mine, mine, mine. And these are very powerful statement intents we can make. So an intention, okay, well, I'm going to get into the next page. So when we own a thought, it becomes a belief. When we say yes to a thought, it becomes a belief. So the key to this is, are you clear about your yes, your no, and your mind? And this is probably the best thing you can teach a child from a young age, to become clear of the vibration of what yes feels like, of what no feels like. So a belief is created at a meta level. It's when we have a thought about a thought. So for instance, in this little diagram, it gives you a great idea of meta level thoughts. So he's first sitting there with this woman, and the first thing he's thinking is, I'm so boring, I can't keep a woman, because it's probably his old programming. And then he has a thought about that, and he says, women find me boring. And then he has a thought about that. Now each one, it goes into a high logical level, which means more information is distorted, the more vague it becomes, the more insidious it becomes. She's bored with me. She's not interested in me. She's looking into the distance. Her eyes, she's focused elsewhere. So it just gives you an example of how you can be saying that nothing's being said, but in his mind he's created this whole meaning of what's really going on when it's not in fact happening at all. So the key is to not create things that don't exist. And this is a challenge a lot of people do. They already create a meaning that's not even happening. So the more meta levels you go up unconsciously, the vaguer the language becomes, the more the information gets generalized, deleted, distorted, which creates confusion and creates uncertainty. So this is where becoming aware of your self-talk is so important. Just becoming aware of, if you catch a thought that's happening unconsciously, or you catch a thought that you're thinking about, and take control over it. So your self-talk opens neurology and it activates feelings in your physiology. So what you think about more frequently, remember, the unconscious, becomes an automatic response. And whether you're consciously rehearsing it or unconsciously rehearsing it, you're still rehearsing it all the time anyway. Everything you are now, up until this point, has been rehearsed, consciously or unconsciously. Otherwise, there's no ways it could be a belief that's autopilot that creates everything you are currently receiving in your reality right now. So whatever you feel is what you believe. And this is what I believe is more important than what people say, just change your belief. I believe it's in setting your feeling is the key, because the conscious mind setting is a result of the feel setting. Because remember, whatever you're feeling, your mind is going to, the thoughts are secondary to the feeling in the body. So to set your own mind and feelings. And proclamations is honestly one of the most powerful ways to get it into your physiology, to make statements of intention, because I'll share with you how this fits into the specific and the vague. Statements of intention. A statement is a direct message. It's a direct wording, which is very descriptive. It's like, feel this, get this, want this, do this. It's very much like tuk, 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 which is basically certainty. When you speak in statements, you're speaking in certainty. When you're speaking in questions, you're speaking in uncertainty. Oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. So questions reveal uncertainty. Statements create certainty, because certain people make statements. And this is something I started realizing. I started researching all like the billionaires and multimillionaires. If you just listen to how they talk, they are just speaking in statements. Statements. I'm this, I will achieve this, I will have that, I am this. And they're proclaiming everything that they are, which is clearly shows you why they are where they are. Because when you proclaim something, when you make a statement of something, and it's got emotion attached to it, it locks into the physiology. Because remember, I believe we create from our physiology, we create from our feeling first, and then it locks into our mindset. So that's why I believe proclamations are so powerful, because when we proclaim things with solid intention, I am this, I will have this, basically we feel it with emotion, which means it locks into the physiology, which means we induce ourselves into that state, which means we have the thoughts which are secondary to the state that we're in. And for us to start embodying these states that we're not used to, we need to rehearse them every day. That's why it's important to do daily proclamations, because a daily proclamation of your intent statements will get you into the states of being that you need to be in to have the resources to create the reality that reflects back to you everything you desire and believe and choose to make real. So if we're creating from our physiology, if we're creating from our state, then that would be the number one focus point, is to focus on what state are you giving off, because that's what's creating everything in your reality. That's what's creating absolutely everything, is your state. And it's what's giving you the resources and the tools, because you can't have resources. Resources basically states, you only have resources equivalent to the state you're in. So without being self-reflexive, which is when your awareness becomes aware of this, you can't tell what state you're in. So the first level is, what state are you in? In any time of the day, you become self-reflexive. What state am I in? Because without knowing what state you're in, you can't actually change to another state. So the first is the identification and the awareness of your state, your current state. So when you make proclamation statements, you download the frequency into your body and you start to feel it. Once you're downloading it into your body consciousness through repetition, through rehearsal, it becomes an autopilot response in the unconscious, which means after rehearsing it for 30, 60 days, it will become automatically part of who you are and just a natural part of your character, a natural part of your character. So sometimes you've got to act the way you want to feel so that you can start to feel the way you want to act. Act the way you want to feel so you can feel the way you want to act. At first, we just got to ingrain in, because it might not be, remember, we've got to make the unfamiliar familiar. So it might not be a familiar feeling, but we need to start rehearsing it until it becomes familiar. Then it becomes an autopilot response. And then naturally, our belief system changes. And naturally, we start to attract those kinds of things. Like if you look at these successful people, everything they're receiving is what they believe. They believe everyone's going to join their business. They believe money is going to just come to them. They are certain about these things because they feel it. And if you feel it, it starts to happen. But sometimes we have to check the reality first. If it's not happening in our reality, we want to make it happen. We have to start rehearsing it in the feeling sense, because it starts in the physiology. Our manifestations start in the physiology first, and then it happens in the reality. Then it materializes into the reality. But if you're not feeling it, it means it's never going to happen. So once you start to feel it, you start to believe it, you know it, it's a certainty, because proclamations are certain statements, they statements of knowing, unquestionable certainty, unquestionable. It's when you take ownership of it, remember, mine, yes, mine. So I'm putting everything together for you nicely now. Take ownership of it, you make certainty statements that you take ownership of till you feel it in your physiology, you repeat it daily until it becomes an unconscious autopilot response when you can recite it. Once that feeling becomes so familiar to you in your body, you'll be able to activate it just like that. Like, I've trained this for quite a few years, so I'm at the point that I can just think of a state and I can immediately go into the state because I'm state rehearsed. I'm rehearsed in my states. And this is just a state. We're designing the state, the perfect state for you to be in to manifest reality of your highest joy or of your preferred reality. So we were all born for greatness, in my belief. And what does greatness mean to you? Because if people are not knowing and believing that they are great, chances are they're not going to create and attract great things. And in my belief, greatness is just a feeling. It's just a feeling. And if we can become familiar with the feeling of what it feels like to expect great things to happen, to know that you're great. Everyone has talent and everyone's great. Everyone's unique. Everyone's special. Everyone has great things within them. But if they do not feel that knowingness, they will not get the reality that will reflect that back to them. It won't happen. So the key is to feel your greatness, to feel greatness in your body, to feel excitement in your body, to feel all the things you want to experience. You have to be a result of them first. Because, you know, there's this in our society, you know, a lot of the things they condition with us confuses us. So they've got this cause and effect. You know, they say it's cause and effect. First it's cause, then it's effect. But it's actually the other way around. First it's effect, then it's cause in terms of manifesting. So I'll give you an example. If you are willing to be the result first, and you are willing to be the cause, I mean, the result, the effect, the cause will fill itself in automatically. So if you are willing to be the result and the effect of what you want to become, the cause will fill itself in automatically. So it's like, if you're willing to be the effect and the result, it means you are standing in the vibration of the idea, the ideal aspect that you want to become, which means all the circumstances that will make that happen will start magnetically falling in, the cause. The cause will automatically happen. We don't have to think about the cause. We just have to focus on the result, and we have to focus on the outcome, and we have to focus on the effect of what we want. So can you imagine what that feels like? That is such an important question to ask. Can you imagine what that feels like? What does that feel like in your physiology? So proclaim it. I'm born to be great. This is one of my proclamations. Born to be great. I deserve greatness. I expect greatness. I am great. It's mine. That's kind of how I do my proclamations in the morning. I state them over and over and over, and then I say, it's mine. Yes. And I glue it to me. I glue those to me, and I keep proclaiming it so I can feel, actually, I can feel this buzz in my body. And then I know that feeling I'm feeling is the sensation of me feeling great. And then if I just reiterate that over and over, that feeling, I do it the next day and the next day and the next day, and that feeling becomes, I'm starting to develop my feeling sense, and I'm getting a visceral sense of what that feels like. So then I've done it 100 times. All I got to do is think, I just got to think, I remember what that feeling feels like, and I go straight into the state. So we all have seeds of potential within us, within each one of you. Each one of us have the exact same amount of potential, but it's what we do with that potential. It's how we ignite that potential, because most people's potential is dormant. They don't even know that they've got the potential there, because the belief might not even be there that says, I've got this potential. But if you believe you've got potential and you believe it's dormant, it means you can ignite and awaken that potential. And I believe we do that through our language, because this is just a metaphor anyways, planting the seed within yourself, that if you nurture the seed and you water the seed, it grows. You nurture it, it sprouts, and it eventually grows into a massive tree, which branches out, you know, and as the tree grows, it can bear fruits, it can bear leaves and colors. You know, so the key to this is also just self-love. Out of all the sessions I've done with all my clients, honestly, I found out that the biggest thing was the self-love as well. Just the confusion of the languaging system and self-love, and then proclamation statements, making statements of intent. And I honestly believe if you can understand those things, you will have full control over yourself and you'll take power into your own hands, because once you understand these things, you are at cause of everything you experience in your life. You can't blame anyone else for anything else. You know, blame is how you give someone the remote control to control you. And no one can control you, and you can't control anyone else. And no one can control your feelings. This is the greatest thing I learned, was that no one can do anything to me to make me feel other than what I choose to feel. So I can't blame anyone for how I feel, because that's my, and if I take ownership of my feelings, it means I can change it, because you can only change what you own. You can't change what you don't own. So this is all about standing in your power. You are more powerful than what you have imagined yourself to be. And it's all about using your imagination. You know, there's a great saying which says this with the imagination. And I don't know if you guys know what a paradox is. You know what paradox is? So basically, one of the great paradoxes is you are more power than what you have imagined yourself to be. And the only reason that's so is because you can imagine that to be so. So all limitation is imagined, which is the ultimate paradox, because we use an unlimited imagination to imagine a limited beliefs. So we're using an unlimited structure to create limitation, and that's the paradox that can free us, is that this imagination can stretch anywhere we want it to go. It can be limited or unlimited, but we're using this nature to create limitation, which is insidious, which is the vague and the specific. So claim your power, claim your greatness, consciously set your mind and feelings on a course to all you desire. Find out what it is you want to become, be the result, be the effect now first, and the cause will fill itself in. So go into your imagination, find out the ideal aspect of what you want to become, and then find out what does that person believe and what does that person feel. And then start creating the proclamations that allow you to feel the feelings now that your best self feels then. And you will shift yourself to that reality where you've always been that way. And I said in the beginning, can't change anything here. You can only change yourself and move to a version of reality that's always had the change, always been changed. So set like the sun every day, fascinate the world with your colors, and your world will become the world of your dreams, because it's how we define it. Remember, nothing means anything. If nothing means anything, it means you're the blank canvas and you can create whatever you want on that canvas. You're the canvas, and every day we have the opportunity to create whatever we want based on our beliefs. But nothing means anything except the beliefs and the meanings we assign to it. You know, once you understand these things, it's so much easier to go into the world and actually take control of your belief set and your mindsets and be able to change yourself however you want to change yourself. So guys, yeah, that's the end of my presentation. I would love to unmute you guys. Can you unmute yourselves? Love to chat to you for a second. I'd love to know what you thought about that. If you guys, just one at a time, could just, if you want to just start, Jason.
Yeah, this is a lot of stuff that with the NLP, that's very interesting, very powerful. The first level, though, I don't know. It was said video, but isn't it visual? The first level there.
Yeah, video, visual. It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Video, visual. The first level is the perception. So it's how we perceiving the video.
Mm-hmm. Video. Yeah, it's very deep, man. Very deep. It's, you got to be ready if this is going to go so.
Yeah, definitely.
Deep, man. That's what I'm saying. But it's a lot of stuff that it can't hurt in knowing a lot of this, because a lot of these things, everyone goes through this, but they just don't know. Like everything that you went through, they don't understand why they're doing certain things.
Yeah.
And so it's helpful if you kind of have just a little bit of even background with this, at least you can kind of
Okay.
put things in perspective. Yeah.
So helpful, even just a little bit. Like I might have gone more than I needed to, but I want to teach it. You know?
An hour and a half. No, no, no.
How long did we go for?
This is like 2.5 hours.
Really? Wow.
I'm ready for second dinner and I'm going to lie down.
Holy cow. Sorry, man. I didn't expect to go that long. And
No,
okay,
you got a
well,
lot of
I'll and for you, Darren, what did you think? I'd love to know what your perspective was.
Yeah, real mind blowing stuff. It's I've seen a lot of NLP stuff in the past and meta programs and things, but yeah, as Jason said, you know, we're really deep, and mind blowing, really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. Hey, like I'm really in love with it because it's the empowerment that's contained within it it's insane. Hey, really.
But you know what? When you go over the meta stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that you almost have to slow down the pace, like cut it in half, because it's
Okay.
for people to process that.
Okay.
It's not like a normal slide. Like when you start talking about it, and you're doing this presentation again, where people are gonna, if
Yes.
they're not aware of it, it's really they have to think about it, and it's not something that registers right away, and it's just that's why they call it meta. It's out there,
I know.
right? So it
That's so
just
true.
takes a moment to, and they might have to go back and review it
Yes.
and look at it,
Totally.
you know. And meta has no time frame.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I've gone now. I've gone meta on you guys. Okay, cool, guys. Well, man, thanks for joining in. I'm so glad I had an audience to share this with. It gives me some nice perspective. Like I said, I've never really taught this information like this before, so it's a nice opportunity for me to share. And maybe I'll go a little bit slower next time for people, just so they can.
Maybe we can touch base outside of this.
Yeah, totally. Let's do that. Definitely.
You have the recording, but separately.
Cool. Perfect. Well, cool, guys. Thank you so much. And thanks for hanging in there. It was made longer than I thought, but I'm glad you guys.
Yeah, another hour and the sun is setting. I got the colors and everything.
Cool, guys. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being here. And we'll be in touch. We'll chat.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Seth.
Okay. Cool. Keep well, hey.
Okay.
Cheers, Abe.
Take care.
Bye.